Matt Westmoreland, and to my right, Councilmember Antonio Lewis. That constitutes a quorum. The next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. College, before we entertain a motion, I just want y'all to be aware that unlike typical meetings that we've had, this one is a little bit different. We have one walk-in resolution, and then we also have an item that was referred to CDHS by another committee, which was Public Safety Legal Administration yesterday. And so these will be the last two agenda items considered today. And so with that, I will move to adopt the agenda. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
Lewis is yes.
The vote is open.
All right, the motion to adopt the agenda is favorable, 4 yeas, 0 nays. I do also want to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilmember Byron Amos and City Council President Doug Shipman. All right, next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I'll go ahead and move to approve minutes. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Motion to approve minutes is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. That takes us to public comment. Do we have anyone sign up for public comment?
Oh, one moment.
All right. So we have two speakers. Ms. Henry Jordan. There you are. Jordan, good to see you. You have 3 minutes.
Give now to the Spirit of God, everyone that's here. If I do not the works of my Father, believe me not. St. John 10, chapter 37, verse. Essentially, Jesus' claim to deity is attested not so much by his verbal witness, but by his works. And they are conclusive. The work that Jesus is doing in me is for his glory, not James Griff's glory or anyone else. But he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. St. Matthew 4:4. It is written, first he quotes Deuteronomy 8, chapter 3, verse, man shall not live by bread alone, by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Jesus' word is more powerful than men's words. Whoso rewardeth evil for good, evil shall not depart from his house. Proverbs 17, chapter 13, verse. Ruth's own concern for Naomi is bound by a strong oath made before the Lord himself. James' gift have rewarded me evil for good. I read the scriptures to James because Jesus' word created income. But he's seeking to control me, not asking for Christ to control him. Jesus' gift was given to me for your protection, but you fight to hurt me. The Spirit of the Lord of God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound. Isaiah 61st chapter, 1st verse. The me on whom the Spirit of the Lord God rests is Christ, the one whom God has anointed to preach good tidings, good news, and to proclaim liberty. If I desire liberty, I must proclaim Jesus' word that gives us liberty, because Christ loved us more than we love ourselves. It's an honor to speak for Christ, but sometimes I don't glorify what Christ wants me to be. And I want that power to do it, because his flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing. We want to walk in the spirit of Christ because it has more power than our own power, than man's power, or woman's power. We need for Christ's help to conquer Satan. You can't conquer Satan without seeking to obey Jesus, because he will control you, and you be thinking you controlling him. But we want Christ's power to control us. We need him more than he need us. We living on his time. He gave it to us. We didn't give it to ourselves. It's what we owe God, our life. Thank you for listening and obey Jesus, Christ-like men and women.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Up next, we have Tracy Austin. Ms. Austin, you'll have 3 minutes. You're good, right at the podium.
Good afternoon. I wanted to just briefly. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. In light of the recent U.S. Open win, which was historic, by a teenager, Black American, and from Atlanta, Coco Gauff, I wanted to redirect attention back to tennis in our city, a lifelong focus of mine. I began playing at the age of 3, competitively at the age of 7. I'm still playing, coaching, promoting, advocating for the sport. I wanted to encourage each of you to take another look at RFP DPR 2303-1230272 and the need to revisit that bid due to the fact that there was only one respondent. I think the bid process is one where it's intended to have something that's competitive, something that the city, the procurement department, the city council, and in this case, our tennis community, can have a fair comparison, particularly for us in the tennis community that have waited for many years to come up with a process that promotes the development of more Coco Gauffs in our world. Oh, wow, a lot of that I already said. Okay. So thank you. I just wanted to bring it back to your attention, put it on the top of your minds, and I appreciate that. One other thing I'll say since I have some more time is that the Washington Park Tennis Center, I have spoken to some of you about it in the past, and I really want to encourage you to look at that tennis center because of its location and the potential for impact on our youth in the city, particularly our youth of color. It is a great opportunity to promote tennis to our youth, something that I don't want us to be fooled. Coco Gauff's win is historic, but it took decades to get there, and it may take another couple decades if we don't make this a priority. And the next one can become more common for people to come out of Atlanta if we look at Washington Park Tennis Center and the opportunity that is there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Austin. All right, that concludes public comment. That takes us to our next item, which is presentations. We have Annie Snagenberger with the Atlanta Housing Commission with a presentation on eviction reduction and recommendations tied to that. And colleagues, I believe this was emailed to you, each of you. Is that correct?
It's in each committee member's committee packet.
In the packets. Thank you. Andy, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, council members. Again, my name is Andy Schnegenberger. Excuse my throat, a little dry today. I'm chair of the Housing Commission, appointed by yours truly. Thank you. We are charged with reviewing the city's housing policies, reviewing the mechanisms by which the city finances affordable housing, looking at the city's permitting process, and assessing best practices in other municipalities and reporting to you and the mayor's office at least once annually. Today I'm here to talk about the recent recommendation that we approved as a commission a little bit earlier this year related to options that the city can move on to reduce the mounting number of evictions in Fulton and DeKalb counties, if not the 5-county metro region. Unfortunately, with the cessation of the moratorium on evictions from the COVID programs, filings have ramped up. I hear that there's a 12,000, 10,000 case backlog across the region, if not pretty extreme numbers in Fulton and DeKalb counties as well. So it's a real issue, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. Our recommendations were pulled together based on a lot of feedback and a lot of input from the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, from Atlanta Legal Aid, both of which are excellent partners in this work on the ground, with the Housing Justice League, Atlanta Apartment Association, the nonprofit sector. All folks were in the room on multiple discussions we had at the commission level on this issue. We have done our best to clarify where the city has clear jurisdiction to act of its own accord and where there are policies that will require further advocacy at the state capitol. But for the most part, I feel like we've put together a short list of things that will be meaningful and impactful. So I'll just go through those real quickly if y'all don't mind. The first and perhaps the most impactful one was a recommendation for the city to declare fundamentally, right, make a commitment, declare a tenant's right to counsel in eviction proceedings. Yes, tenants ostensibly have that right, but it's very, very difficult for them frequently to access that based on the fact that a lot of tenants that find themselves in this position are not, rolling in cash, if you will. Relatively low-income households that are already strapped financially and don't have access to representation. Based on data from the Housing Justice League, up to 90% of landlords have representation in eviction proceedings in court, whereas only 10% or so in general of tenants have representation. So there's an indication of an imbalance in the fairness of the application of the law in eviction court, and the need for the other parts of this recommendation to help tenants facing eviction access that legal aid. The recommendation is to support that declaration, right, in two ways. The first is to provide tenants and landlords with information and support about the eviction process and the rights that they have. And to provide pre-eviction diversion resources, particularly for low-income renters, to reduce evictions and eviction filings, in addition to maintaining the access to counsel component of the program. So this is in reference to a pilot program that the city has begun already. It's in partnership with the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. It is geographically restricted to certain neighborhoods on the west side. From all accounts, that seems to be a relatively successful program. I know they're still working on that, and there's still some good feedback to be gained from the successes of that program. But in general, providing information to both landlords and tenants about their rights and how the process works could be very helpful in terms of mitigating future eviction filings. And then, of course, providing services that will help with negotiations to mitigate filings that have been recorded, to avoid taking those cases actually to court, to mitigate those filings, if you will. And then, of course, for the filings that do go forward to court, providing access to legal counsel. So that's sort of a wraparound approach to the service that could be provided in that case, that this program does do. And I believe that The mayor's office is currently looking at expanding that program citywide, using funds from the Housing Trust Fund to support that expansion, but expanding not only geographically but also demographically with specific targets on very low-income households, people under 21 years of age, I think, or maybe 24, but with an emphasis on younger folks also. That all sounds really good to the commission. We got a presentation yesterday at our commission meeting from the mayor's office about these recommendations and the mayor's response to them. There was some information yesterday about the work that they're doing to expand that program, so it looks like it's in the works. I definitely encourage us all to stay alert and plugged in on that, but it seems like that's a really good first step forward, which of course also responds to the second piece, which was to expand these resources citywide. The one caveat, of course, being we suggest that there be a dedicated source of funding for that expansion of the program, since that is not necessarily going to be inexpensive, but the benefits are great, as you can imagine. The second recommendation was to pass legislation to ratify a recent resolution that this council adopted within the limits of state law, of course, that would require the acceptance by landlords of housing choice and Georgia housing vouchers that receive public investment. This was in response to the fact that many landlords simply refuse to accept tenants that carry housing vouchers with them, despite the fact that it's guaranteed rent, basically. This is a huge problem, and it's part of the reason why so many tenants, even though they have a voucher, have trouble actually finding housing and end up losing their reservation on that voucher. Our recommendation is to strengthen what was previously a resolution and make it more of a requirement. As I understand it, the mayor's office is also looking at introducing a paper that would move in that direction. Not clear exactly what will be involved there, but this is another piece that the city can do because it's based on application to, or applicability to landlords that are receiving public funding, right? So the city has the ability to legally add some expectations. The third recommendation is to require to every extent possible the transparent disclosure of costs associated with leasing rental housing in the city of Atlanta before accepting non-refundable application fees. This is based on numerous instances that we were informed about where some landlords are advertising rent at a certain level, say $1,500 a month. They will charge non-refundable application fees that sometimes are excessive in the commission's opinion based on the total rent. But if a tenant, for example, sees on a website that rent for a two-bedroom unit is $1,700 a month, fill out an application fee, pay the however much it is, $100, $300, get accepted, go to the leasing office to sign a lease and find out that, there's also fees associated with security, with garbage pickup, with internet access, with additional power, like all sorts of junk fees that are associated with leasing the unit that haven't been advertised. And so these fees added up can substantially increase the effective rent of a unit. So what we're recommending is that all of these fees associated with leasing a unit be advertised with the rent on the front end so that folks understand what it is they're actually signing up for and have the ability to say, look elsewhere before paying that pre-application fee and not being able to get it back. The fourth recommendation is to continue advocating for change to state law in order to provide a 7-day right to cure period for tenants prior to an eviction filing, as well as written notice by landlords of an eviction filing. House Bill 404 in the last session attempted to make some headway in this regard. I think right now there's a 3-day right to cure. And there may be no legal requirement for written notice to a tenant from a landlord. Obviously, having those two things available to tenants would be hugely helpful. Having a couple of more days to be able to cure their case, pay the landlord back in the case of a pending eviction filing in order to avoid eviction would be hugely helpful. And this is according to a lot of feedback from staff at Atlanta Legal Aid and the Volunteer Lawyers Foundation that actually represent tenants in the courtroom. They've been very vocal about the fact that this move would help in a lot of cases. We've heard from the mayor's office that they will prioritize this in the upcoming state legislative session. So hopefully we'll be able to build some support statewide with other municipalities and move this thing forward. So that's the one piece on here that really does explicitly require action at the state capitol in order to enact. The last recommendation is to improve immediate public access to code enforcement actions against rental properties. We've been in conversation with the mayor's office about this one, but this is based on information that a number of tenants who are facing eviction are in a situation where the property that they live in is substandard. And they are seeking to use that as justification for either being late on their rent payments or failing to pay their rent payments because they're living in substandard conditions. Despite the fact that state law does not allow that legally, tenants have to pay no matter what. You can imagine that some tenants, of course, try to use this as leverage to get repairs made to their units. The problem that has popped up from time to time is that the Open Records Act has an exception that allows for ongoing investigations or open cases to not be subject to public disclosure. So whereas code enforcement filings are generally available for public access on the city's Excella portal, in the case where a code enforcement division decides to not make this information public because it's an open, they're calling it like an open case, right? Those are situations where tenants can't access that information and use that in court to help strengthen their argument. Attorneys have had trouble on a couple of cases at least with this issue. The problem is exacerbated when, as some code enforcement cases do, they get strung out and delayed and extended, and landlords are given extensions on the required period where they need to repair a property. If it drags out, then it makes it it exacerbates the problem. It makes it more difficult from a timing perspective for tenants that are facing eviction to have access to that information in order to, again, use in their court case. But the other problem that it presents is that in cases where prospective tenants might be doing research on properties that have received code enforcement filings, if that information isn't available, they don't, it's an example of where they might not know what they're signing up for, right? If a property has been cited once or numerous times. So we're recommending that the city change the application of that practice. We understand when it may be sensible to do that if it's a single family property that's being rented and it's a mom and pop landlord. In cases where it's a large multifamily, especially if it's an investor-owned property, there's, in our perspective, there's really no reason to not have that information be readily available because of the public health threat, frankly. So that's an overview. Happy to answer any questions at your discretion.
Thank you, Andy. Before we take questions from colleagues, I do want to acknowledge we've been joined by my colleague, Councilmember Keisha Shawn Waits. I did have a couple of quick questions. The first was, I recognize some of the recommendations are similar or the same as what was presented to this body before as part of the tenant Bill of Rights. I imagine, and I know thanks to my colleague, Councilmember Amos and his leadership, we were able to pass a resolution that supported that. I was curious how much of that influenced or informed y'all's thinking they are drafting these recommendations, and whether or not y'all have any thoughts too around funding opportunities to support some of these programs. So specifically the, permanently expanding the eviction defense program citywide. Do y'all have y'all had the capacity or ability to do any analysis on cost and what that will look like for the city, and where we should probably be identifying funding opportunities to support that, recognizing we're working on putting a stronger framework in place for the Housing Trust Fund itself?
Yeah.
That was a big question, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. To the first point about understanding what the costs might be on a, per case basis, we've really been waiting for a better understanding from that pilot program and how it operates and how effective they've been able to be from a cost perspective there, before we can really understand, what we could expect, right, on a per case basis. This is me personally speaking from my experience. My hunch is that one of the primary values of this program, which I should say the city is standing up in the context of the Housing Help Resource Center, I believe is what they're calling it, right? The primary value there is being able to mitigate filings, both before the landlord feels like they need to be filed in the first case, but also before they actually go to court, through negotiations and finding common ground to settle cases, so that we can just avoid cases going to court in the first place, but also to start bringing down that backlog. I think that's going to be a lot more cost effective than having to represent folks in court. So hopefully that part of that program will end up being very, very cost effective. Don't have a number that I can share with you just yet, but I hope we'll be able to get that. As far as a resource, y'all know that I feel pretty strongly about the trust fund being used for production purposes only. That said, I understand that there are other sources of funding that are much less sort of defined. The Gulch Trust Fund money, for example, is out there. Don't have any opposition to the use of those funds for those purposes. One of the recommendations that we did consider was to increase the filing fee of evictions to, make it just provide a little bit more incentive for landlords to negotiate before they actually file one, because it's very, very cheap. It's like less than $100 to file for an eviction in court. Unfortunately, we also learned that those fees just get passed on to the tenants in the end anyway, so that's not really an inhibitor or really a mechanism for bringing funding back to the service end of it, right? But that's something that I would be happy to take up at the commission level to start looking into what some sources may be available. I know just standing here talking, I know that would tie into other research that's been done about dedicated sources for the trust fund, right? And the fact that there are some difficulties in finding a source according to state law that can be applied. But I'm happy to take that back and see if we can't dig into that a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
And that was a long answer.
Hey, long question, long answer. Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you for the report today, Mr. Andy, Chairman Andy. A couple of things I wanted to talk about. We all know that the eviction filings, we increase the rate, they'll just push it over to folks. I haven't met a person who has had to pay for an eviction, who remained in their place, who did not have to pay the increased eviction filing rate as well to remain. So I would not recommend that at all, unless we can force them to not do that. Next, trust funds. I'm open with the trust funds being used, but I'm also thinking about tapping into our other partners. We do know that the dollar is split up 3 ways, and the responsibility of Fulton County. The city of Atlanta, 52 cents goes to APS, 24 cents goes to Fulton County, 26 comes to the city of Atlanta. I want to know, have you explored the partnerships with APS? Because when an eviction happens, a student is now unstable and they're changing schools as well. So have we explored our relationship with the county and with APS to make sure they're maximizing their dollars? Because I do remember when we first got elected, the city and state had to send back money to the federal government because of people not using their funding. So have you examined that relationship?
Not directly, no. Though to your point, Councilman Lewis, I'm increasingly involved in conversations that connect the challenges of educational attainment by kids that are displaced from their housing, that face housing insecurity during the course of a school year, and have to move out of their school district, right? Can't attend the same school. That disruption is a huge inhibitor for educational attainment for kids. So I think, from what I understand, school board is starting to realize that this is an issue beyond just sort of the fundamental, issue of the dignity of having a safe and secure housing, but it also directly impacts the results that they're seeking, right? So I do think that there's room for the commission to start that conversation proactively, and see where there aren't some areas for collaboration, not just on this eviction prevention issue, but on affordable housing and housing security issues in general. I know that the Board of Education has done some work on housing affordability in the last couple of years. I'm not sure at this point where or if that's gone, or to the degree to which they're considering that as a planning issue, but I will be happy to make sure that we sort of get engaged in that conversation and see if we can't start some connection there.
And I think my last question is, have we also explored the possibility of direct funding from the federal government or the state? Just understanding how the city of Atlanta has, we've been really good at taking care of people. We've extended beyond what our responsibility as a city is. And right now we're trying to go even further. And so to do that, I think that we need to go look at the funding that the folks that are supposed to be helping us in this partnership right now, look and see if they're doing it, or look and see if we can get direct funding from our two senators who love us here in the city of Atlanta. Look if we can get some direct funding to us that the state may be missing out on because they aren't expanding healthcare. They aren't looking for certain things. So let's see if we can get some direct funding. So have you explored that?
No, we haven't, but I love that idea.
Yeah. So 2 recommendations right there we just put in to see how our partners who are supposed to be doing this, Fulton County and APS, are using their current funding, and to see if we can get the city of Atlanta, because we've done it before, specifically during COVID, when we got direct funding and the county, they took care of the other cities. The county is a big county. They have other cities that have different needs than the city of Atlanta has. And so let's see if we can explore that type of relationship again, in which we get direct funding from these folks that we have up in DC, because they know our governor sometimes doesn't work well.
Got it.
Thank you.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. Councilmember Waits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, Andy. Good to see you this afternoon. I put some legislation forward with the recommendations that were provided by the Housing Commission. Have you had an opportunity to look at that?
I have seen it, yes.
Okay, great. I think it mirrors pretty much what you guys indicated in terms of the recommendation to the administration. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So it's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, you'd like to hold that today?
So
The resolution?
After some conversations with Josh Humphreys with the administration, I know they're working on similar legislation as an ordinance instead of resolution. I would like to make sure those are aligned. So yes, so that there is some alignment that can be done. That was my ask based on the conversation
Okay,
I had.
I
with
just
them.
want to be clear why we were holding it. And the other piece is I want to be on record indicating that we're two separate bodies of government. We have an administration and then we have the legislative body, which is us. And it is my hope moving forward that we will start to separate the two in terms of us setting policy in terms of what we need to move forward. But nonetheless, I think we accomplished our goal in terms of the administration taking a look at changing some of the ordinances that will align with the recommendations that your agency has made.
I will say, and thank you for calling attention to it, Councilmember Waits. I will say that what I'm hoping to see from the paper, and again, we heard this yesterday from the mayor's office, right, that there's a paper forthcoming. Haven't seen the contents of it yet, but what I hope is that there is language in that paper, and this is related to the use of the dollars in the Housing Trust Fund, right, that there is language in there that clearly outlines goals and eligibility for the use of those funds. Production-oriented uses for the most part, I hope. I understand that there are other ideas for some other use of those funds, but what the commission has recommended, and this is based on years of advocacy with community developers and affordable housing developers that need those types of funds to produce very low-income units that the city is most lacking right now, right? That the Housing Opportunity Bond Program cannot in itself provide for. It's necessary for those Housing Trust Fund, for those grant-based dollars to be able to pair up with the low-interest debt products of Invest Atlanta, the Housing Opportunity Bond Program, in order to be able to facilitate financial feasibility for these projects, charging very, very, very low rents, right? So what I hope is that this legislation will include some guidelines for targeted eligibility for producing housing for homes at 50% of the area median or below, specifically targeting very low-income households, right? But also retaining flexibility in the use of those funds across a project, right? So it could be used to buy land, it could be used to construct the housing, it could be used to support pre-development costs, it could be used for down payment assistance in home ownership instances, right? So that there's a variety of applicable uses for those funds, all targeted towards production and preservation, though, right, for very low-income households. So those are the kinds of guidelines that weren't included in our recommendations specifically that I'm hoping to see in that paper.
Thank you. Councilmember Lewis,
Mr. Chair, final thought. Do we have an idea when that paper will be coming to this body?
next 2 to 3 weeks was the last that I was told. Is that similar to your conversation that you had with the administration?
We weren't given a timeline.
Okay, that was the timeline I was given.
Okay, I'm just indicating that given the affordable housing crisis that we have, that I would think that this is something that should be urgent for all of us.
Yep. Councilmember Lewis.
And my question is, why didn't you include those in the recommendation?
We were trying to put forth a recommendation that was that sort of alluded to those guidelines, but we were honestly also trying to accommodate the fact that we weren't sure which entity was actually going to administer the Housing Trust Fund. So the commission, and so that led to a certain amount of uncertainty about how specific we really should be with those recommendations. We did not pull any punches in terms of the fact that the commission believes that the funds should be targeted for households that earn 50% of the area median or less. That was the top recommendation. But I'm sorry, Councilmember Lewis. What it boils down to is that there could have been some differences in those recommendations depending on who is actually going to administer the fund, and so we're happy to stay at the table and help sharpen, any language that comes forward, because we're definitely committed to seeing that trust fund applied as it was originally advocated for.
And I truly appreciate you for doing this, but I really prefer if you would have added them to the recommendations because I know we're going to try to craft the legislation as a legislative body. And what you give us, we love. When you said that, I cut my speaking part off. I didn't even have to talk because you said everything that I wanted to be included with using the trust funds, because I first want to look at the people who's because as a city, we've been making sure that we plug the holes that we see. But first, we need to look at Fulton County, look at APS, because that dollar is split 52, 26, 24, and 24 is supposed to go just to this. And they're looking at raising rates on us. So I want to look at that usage. Then I want to look at federal funding that we can directly apply for, because we do know our governor and the folks that we have downtown, I mean, across the street, they have not been as friendly with us as bringing in federal funding that's free dollars. So I want to make sure we're looking at these things before we use our trust fund, our rainy day funds for this.
And Councilman Lewis, any other questions from colleagues? Chairman Schneeberger, just before we wrap up, I just do want to clarify, because I definitely agree with everything that's been said here, how important and how integral the Housing Trust Fund is to our city's ability to produce affordable housing. Is why I fought so hard to get an extra $3.5 million added to the trust fund this year. One of the things I do want to make clear in why I'm trying to make sure there's alignment with any legislation that's being written about this issue is that if we as a body pass a resolution with X amount of things that, it's our guidelines, and then 2-3 weeks later or 2 or 3 months later, we pass the ordinance that has differing language, I think that can be a challenge and be a problem for us to be able to navigate going forward, particularly for you all as y'all are trying to manage as much of this as possible. So I just want to reiterate my commitment to you all and the work that you're doing. I appreciate this list of recommendations. I think eviction defense and protecting our renters is something that as a city we don't talk about enough, and just wanted to say thank you so much for all the work y'all are putting in to right this ship as best as possible. So with that, Councilman Waits.
So much, Mr. Chair. I just want to indicate that it's my understanding from speaking with members of this commission that these recommendations have been made for several years. And so I'm happy to see that the administration is moving on this, but nonetheless, the resolution and the ordinances, they're two separate things. One is a recommendation. And so, frankly, I don't know why we can't move that today, but I will respect the will of this body. Thank you.
Councilmember Westmoreland.
Thank you. As the person of this body who authored the creation of the Housing Trust Fund, a couple of things to clear up. One, it was because of a conversation the two of us had in the fall of 2021. It took effect for the first time ever in June of 2022. It was fully funded because members of this legislative body ensured so. It was fully funded this last year because you made sure it was. And it's good practice to make sure that the two branches of government are working in coordination to make sure that we're spending money as well as we can. So thanks for helping create it to begin with. And we'll set some guidelines here in the next couple weeks to make sure that we spend it thoughtfully.
And if I may, Councilmember Lewis, I'd love to follow up with you to get a little bit more clarity on your thoughts about the funding issue.
And I'm always thinking about federal government because I used to work on Capitol Hill, and I know about some relationships that we have in this city with our U.S. congressperson, with our U.S. senators, that if there's some funding out there, we need to be able to apply for it directly, because we've seen that we've been able to dispense our funding a little differently since we've been on this body.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Schneeberger. All right, that takes us to our consent agenda, section G, ordinance for first reading. Mr. Evans, if you can sound item number 1.
Item number 1 is 23-01513, an ordinance by Community Development and Human Services Committee to adopt the 2024 to 2028 capital improvements element, which includes capital improvements that the city intends to fund in whole or in part with development impact fees in compliance with the requirements of the Georgia Development Impact Fee Act and for other purposes.
All right. That is the only item that we have for first reading. So that takes us to ordinance for second reading. Colleagues, items 2 through 4 are very similar. They are related to accepting grant funding to support a number of our different neighborhood centers and community centers across the city. I would like to take those items as a block if you don't have any issues with that. All right, so we'll go ahead and take items 2 through 4 as a block. Mr. Evans, you sign those captions, and then we'll proceed with the legislative action.
Item number 2 is 23-014-64, an ordinance by Community Development and Human Services Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to accept grant funds from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget for the American Rescue Plan Act Improving Neighborhood Outcomes in Disproportionately Impacted Communities grant program for the Dunbar Neighborhood Center on behalf of the Department of Enterprise Asset Management. To enter into grant agreement in connection with the award, to anticipate and appropriate proceeds in the amount of $2,200,000.00 into the Department of Enterprise Asset Management. And for other purposes, item number 3, 23-014-65, an ordinance by Community Development and Human Services Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to accept grant funds from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget for the American Rescue Plan Act Improving Neighborhood Outcomes and Disproportionately Impacted Communities grant program for the Atlanta WorkSource Community Center on behalf of the Department of Enterprise Asset Management to enter into a grant agreement in connection with the award, to anticipate and appropriate proceeds in the amount of $2,200,000.00 into the Department of Enterprise Asset Management and for other purposes. And item number 4, 23-014-66, an ordinance by Community Development and Human Services Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to accept grant funds from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget for the American Rescue Plan Act Improving Neighborhood Outcomes in Disproportionately Impacted Communities grant program for the J.C. Verdine Neighborhood Center on behalf of the Department of Enterprise Asset Management to enter into a grant agreement in connection with the award, to anticipate and appropriate proceeds in the amount of $2,200,000.00 into the Department of Enterprise Asset Management and for other purposes.
We have Deputy Commissioner Chris Davis for the Department of Enterprise Asset Management. Welcome to CDHS.
Welcome. Good afternoon, committee chair and other members of the committee. Yes, the purpose of this legislation as it's written is for us to receive grant funding for certain locations for neighborhood center for some improvements that we've identified in the documentation that was submitted earlier.
Questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and move approval. Thank you. Second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. It's 5 yeas, 0 nays.
All right, before we move to the next item, I just do want to acknowledge and make a comment for my community members, so just putting on my District 4 hat really quickly, but this is about $2 million for the Dunbar Neighborhood Center in Mechanicsville, which is a centerpiece for community activity in the Mechanicsville neighborhood. And just to see so much investment happening in Mechanicsville in this way is a big deal. And I know our office has been working with DEEM and with the Department of Parks and Recreation on helping to envision what the remodeling and the build out is going to look like and how it will better serve the community. But I just want to say thank you to you and your team and the city staff for investing in our communities in this way. So we took these as a block, but I think it's important to note that this is a big investment for our community.
Much appreciated. We look forward to the work that we plan on doing as well. Thank you.
And I think Councilmember Lewis wanted to add something as well.
And I want to add that John Burdeen Center, the John Burdeen Center, which is in the center of Lakewood and Polar Rock, needs this as well. So I want to say I appreciate you and I appreciate the mayor's office for pointing at and watching the south side of Atlanta. When you have this type of investment on the south side of Atlanta, this type of investment in young people in Atlanta, you'll see the results of it 20 years from now. I know that 30 years ago when they created Roselle Fan, then named Southeast, it changed who I am today. So we'll see young folks grow up through these centers and sit in these seats one day and make decisions to do things for people 20 and 30 years later after them. So I say appreciate you for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. See, that's what happens when Dean comes to CDHS. You get all sorts of praises. Next item, item number 5.
Item number 5, 23-014-67, an ordinance by Community Development and Human Services Committee to authorize the Chief Financial Officer or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to transfer the total expenditure amount from the intergovernmental fund source to the Department of Grants and Community Development general fund account for the purpose of satisfying disallowed costs from the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS contract with Aid Atlanta, Hope Atlanta, and Status Home, formerly known as Jerusalem House, in the amount not to exceed $20,052.00 and for other purposes.
All right, thank you for joining us.
Hello. The purpose of this.
And if you could state your name for the.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Genevieve Jones, Department of Grants and Community Development. The purpose of this legislation is we had some costs that HUD has determined is not eligible to be expended through the grant funding, and we would have to transfer those expenses to general fund.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? Motion to approve by Westmoreland, second by Winston. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
And it's favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you. That takes us to item number 6.
23-01472, an ordinance by Councilmember Byron D. Amos authorizing the City of Atlanta to accept an in-kind donation of the Inner Explorer Mindfulness Program with an estimated value in the amount of $55,000.00 from the Greenlight Fund Atlanta pursuant to Section 1-102C7 of the City of Atlanta's Charter to support the Atlanta Year of the Youth Mayoral Initiative, authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into any necessary agreements to effectuate receipt of the donation and for other purposes.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Sparks. I serve as Senior Advisor to Mayor Dickens for Strategic Partnerships and Strategic Initiatives. This is an in-kind donation provided by 2 community partners with the goal of increasing mental health and emotional wellness for youth beginning in City of Atlanta recreation programs. So that would be camps, after-school activities, any youth that are engaged in parks and rec programs. This program has been implemented in a number of cities, Boston, Tampa, Clayton County, with over 5 years' time, anywhere from a 10 to 20 point improvement in math and English grades, as well as decrease in violent and conflict behaviors. It's provided by the Greenlight Fund, which is paying for it as part of their model, bringing innovative services into the city. And then Inner Explorer is the 501c3 that will provide the programming and support TA for the DPR staff as they seek to implement it with our youth.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? There's a motion to approve by Amos. There's a second by Westmoreland. Any discussion? None. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you so much, Ms. Sparks. All right, item number 7.
23-01476, an ordinance by Councilmember Andrea L. Boone amending the city's 2015 to 2019 Consolidated Plan, 2023, the Community Development Grant Fund budget, and the 2016 Annual Action Plan budget, the 2017 Annual Action Plan budget for the purpose of reprogramming of Home Investment Partnership Program in an amount not to exceed $1,421,848.00, authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the Department of Grants and Community Development to enter into service agreements with subrecipients for the purpose of executing various contractual agreements for projects that are assigned to the Department of Grants and Community Development and for other purposes, and for other departments of the city and for other purposes.
All right, colleagues, the Department of Grants and Community Development and the sponsor of this paper have asked for us to file, but before, there's a motion. I'll make the motion in a second by Westmoreland, but Ms. Jones, if you want to give any insight to why y'all are asking us to file this paper before we take the vote.
We determined that we didn't need this one anymore because we had already had an ordinance for it, so it was duplicative.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion and a second on the table. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the item is, the motion to file is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. All right, next item.
Item number 8, 23-01477, an ordinance by Councilmember Andrea L. Boone to amend Ordinance 23-01360, adopted by the Atlanta City Council on August 11th, 2023, and approved by operation of law on August 11th, 2023, to authorize adding the funding strings for community development block grant program projects approved for funding from the 2023 notice of funding availability, which were erroneously excluded from the exhibits to the ordinance and for other purposes.
Ms. Jones, you want to give us an update on this one, and we'll take action.
The recommendation document that was presented did have all of these awards in there. However, the funding strings were not included in the actual legislation. So this is to include those funding strings for the awards that were previously recommended.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? Motion to approve by Westmoreland. I'll second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Item number 9. And colleagues, just before you read in item number 9, I know we have a substitute that makes some changes to the caption, so I actually will move to bring forth the substitute. There's a second by Westmoreland, and just to clarify, that substitute changes the date of the public hearing that's referenced in the caption, as well as there's some other language cleanup. So if you could please open that vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
And the motion to bring forth the substitute is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Now, Mr. Evans, if you can sound the caption as substituted.
It's an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Dozier is substituted by Community Development and Human Services Committee, an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing, pro-housing, grant fund opportunity, if awarded, to accept such funding in an amount not to exceed an amount up to $10 million and 0 cents, to execute any necessary grant agreements to effectuate acceptance of the grant, to amend the fiscal year 2024 intergovernmental grant fund budget by adding to anticipations and appropriations an amount not to exceed $10 million and 0 cents. All contracted services shall be charged to and paid from the accounts listed herein and for other purposes.
Yes.
Yes, so we are applying for a competitive grant. It's called the program Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing. It carries the CDBG format. So the expectation is that we will be successful in this grant, and we're super excited about applying for it. So this allows us to do so. The requirements for this grant do require a public hearing and a public comment period. So I think at this point we just need the approval to apply and have that public comment period and public hearing within the CDHS.
Thank you. So with that, I'll go ahead and move to approve on substitute. Is there a second? Second by Westmoreland. Any discussion? Seeing none, please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
The item is favorable on substitute, 6 yeas, 0 nays. That takes us to item number 10. And colleagues, this item also has a substitute that impacts the caption. And this substitute inserts a needed project number into the account strings and provides some other language cleanup. So I will go ahead and move to bring forward that substitute for item number 10. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
And the motion to bring forth the substitute is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Mr. Evans, you can sound the caption for number 10.
23-01482, an ordinance by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland is substituted by Community Development and Human Services Committee, authorizing the Chief Financial Officer or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to transfer expenditure amount from the 2019 Intergovernmental Grant Fund budget for the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS fund source to the 2020 Intergovernmental Grant Fund budget for the Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS fund source in an amount not to exceed $461,681.48 to successfully close out the 2020 HOPWA grant agreement with U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and to satisfy costs for the Healthy Housing Aid Atlanta Hopwa Capital Acquisition Project. All contract services shall be charged to and paid from the account numbers listed herein and for other purposes.
Jones.
Yes. So the purpose of this legislation, we were awarded an extension for our HOP 119 funding, which brings that expiration date to December of this year. However, our HOP 120 funding expires in October of this year, and we've determined that Aid Atlanta is available. They have expenditures available that will allow us to close out this grant in a timely fashion.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from colleagues? There's a motion to approve on substitute by Councilmember Westmoreland. I'll go ahead and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
The item is favorable on substitute, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you. All right, that concludes ordinances for second reading. That takes us to resolutions. Colleagues, let me see if this changes the caption.
There's a small change in the caption.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and bring forth the substitute for item number 11. Thank you. I'll make the motion to bring forth the substitute. Just second by Westmoreland, but just to clarify for the public, this substitute provides some needed account strings, and there's some other language cleanup involved with that substitute. So there's a motion and second before us. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Motion to bring forth the substitute is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Mr. Evans, if you can please sound the caption.
This is 23R4030, a resolution by Council Member Byron D. Amos, as substituted by Community Development and Human Services Committee, authorizing the City of Atlanta pursuant to Section 6-306 of the Charter of the City of Atlanta to donate $500,000.00 to the United Way of Greater Atlanta to support the Atlanta Youth Fund, authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into any necessary agreements to effectuate the donation, and authorizing the chief financial officer or his designee to pay all payments from the accounts listed herein and for other purposes.
Ms. Sparks.
Yes, hello again. The purpose of this legislation is to formally establish the ATL Youth Fund in partnership with the United Way of Greater Atlanta. What that is a partnership between Mayor Dickens and the United Way, in which United Way accepts philanthropic contributions from donors who are seeking to support the ATL Year of the Youth, whether that is a specific City of Atlanta initiative led by the mayor, or a more general youth-serving organization in the city, and they want to donate and have it be in alignment with the Year of the Youth initiative. That's the general purpose of the legislation. The version that I have as a substitute does not reference a donation. So there, to my knowledge, there is no donation from the city on the table right now.
I only know what the Department of Finance has provided me today.
Okay. Well,
That's true.
all right, so colleagues, so this is a dual referred item, so I don't have any issues moving out of committee, but just recognizing there seems to be a little bit of a discrepancy. I'd like to make a motion to move to forward without recommendation.
Okay.
It is dual referred to finance, and so I think that gives us some time to hash out whatever that discrepancy might be before the finance committee.
Okay, thank you. We'll rectify that.
All right, so second by Amos, please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the item is, and this might be a question for the parliamentarian, because we substituted it earlier, is favorable or forwarded with recommendation on substitute. Is that? Okay. Do we need a reference to the fact that it was substituted at all in that? So we substituted it before we took any action. Is it is it substituted and then forwarded? I just don't know what the correct parliamentary phrasing is for. Okay. Amber A. Robinson.
Yes. Hi, Amber A. Robinson, City of Atlanta Department of Law. I do believe it would be appropriate to say that the ordinance was approved on substitute. The substitute was approved, and then the substitute is moved forward with no recommendation to make it clear that this was substituted in this committee.
All right. Thank you. And I just wanted to make that as abundantly clear for the public as possible. If y'all are following at home or in the room. So, but this will be dual referred. This is dual referred and will be on the Finance Executive Committee agenda for tomorrow. All right. Next item, number 12.
There's a substitute in your packet for number 12 as well. That will change the caption.
And before we bring forward the substitute, I just want to clarify with the author that you're good with the substitute language for.
Correct.
Okay.
And we're going to hold to that, correct? All right.
So I'll go ahead and move to bring forward the substitute. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. Would all members please vote? The vote is closed.
And the motion to bring forward the substitute is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays.
I'll read the caption.
Yes, thank you.
This is item number 12, 23R4037, a resolution by Council Member Keisha Sean Waits as substituted by the Community Development and Human Services Committee, a resolution to accept the recommendations of the Atlanta Housing Commission regarding the use of the building, the Beloved Community Housing Trust Fund, requesting the mayor's office to report to the city council on the implementation of the recommendations of the Atlanta Housing Commission and for other purposes.
Councilmember Waits, did you want to add anything before we accept or make a motion to hold? I know, since you're the author of the paper, now that we're at this point of the agenda, I just want to give you an opportunity to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will make the motion to hold.
Okay. Motion by Waits, second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
And the item is substituted and held, 6 yeas, 0 nays. That takes us to item number 13.
23R4038, a resolution by Councilmember Keisha Sean Waits urging the mayor or his designee to consider acquiring the Wellstar Hospital property site for development of the John Robert Lewis Health and Wellness Center and for other purposes.
Councilmember Waits, did you want to add anything on this item?
I believe that this is another one that the recommendation is to hold. Who's made the recommendation to hold? I'm just curious. Is that the administration as well?
No, this is based on the council member of the district one that.
I just want to also indicate for the record that given the loss of the Wellstar property, which all of you already are aware of, that is a loss of a level 1 trauma center for the region, and it just makes our city very vulnerable. And it is my hope that we can have some serious conversations in terms of use of the property to do something similar to a wellness center. I think would be very appropriate given that area. But I'm happy to yield and work with the actual district member in terms of moving that forward. But nonetheless, I do believe that there are some safety concerns in terms of the loss of that space and how we go forward with ensuring that we have coverage for the city, given the loss of the level 1 trauma status for the region. And I will make the motion to hold.
Now I'll go ahead and second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Motion to hold is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. That takes us to item number 14. Colleagues, there is a substitute for this item. I feel like substitute is the word of the day. This particular substitute inserts some needed account strings, and I'll go ahead and bring forth that substitute. We'll move to bring forth that substitute. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the motion to bring forth the substitute is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Mr. Evans, can you please sound the caption?
This is 23R4043, a resolution by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland authorizing the City of Atlanta to donate a total amount not to exceed $700,000.00 to Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metro Atlanta pursuant to Section 6-306 of the City of Atlanta's Charter to support the Level Up program, authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into any necessary agreements to effectuate the donation and to authorize the chief financial officer or his designee to make all payments from the accounts listed herein and for other purposes.
Ms. Sparks.
Yes, thank you again. The purpose of this legislation is to support the Level Up program that's been founded by Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metro Atlanta. It is a unique program in that it's a group mentoring program in middle schools in which they actually hire young adults from the community to serve as qualified mentors within the schools. So there are at least weekly mentoring sessions, 3 staff people per school. Currently, they're slated to expand with this funding to 3 additional schools in APS in neighborhoods that the data shows the children are very much in need of this service. Those schools have not been finalized as yet, and we invite input from this council into those schools. For example, schools that have come up as an option are Bunch Middle, John Lewis Invictus Academy, and Russell. The $700,000 over a course of 4 years helps that expansion in a phased approach. So they're adding 50 to 100 students per year.
Right. Any questions or comments from colleagues? There's a motion to approve on substitute by Westmoreland. I will second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Approved on favorable on substitute, 5 yeas, 0 nays. And colleagues, just a reminder, this is dual referred, and this will be forwarded to the Finance Executive Committee for their agenda tomorrow at 1:30. It's been a while since I was on Finance Committee. Thank you. All right, next item.
Item number 15, 23R4046, a resolution by Councilmember Amir Faroki requesting that Invest Atlanta explore financing solutions to aid residents in the construction and maintenance of attached dwelling units and for other purposes.
Colleagues, I spoke with the author of this legislation, and he has spoken with Invest Atlanta, and they are in support of this exploration work. And so recognize he's talked with the impact agency. I will go ahead and move to approve. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
And item is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. All right, next item.
Item 16, 23R4054, a resolution by Councilmember Amir Faroki requesting that the Parks and Recreation Department conduct a safety audit of the Candler Park Golf Course and for other purposes.
All right, colleagues, similarly, I talked with the author of this legislation. My understanding, he did speak with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and I think they have a meeting coming up in the coming weeks. But Deputy Commissioner Voss, I don't know if you had anything to add to this paper or wanted to, before I make a motion to approve.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug Voss, Department of Parks and Recreation. We have spoken to Councilmember Faroki. We understand the concerns in the neighborhood. This is a used course in a very highly residential neighborhood, so we understand the purpose of the safety audit and happy to oblige.
All right. There's a motion to approve by Westmoreland. I will second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
The item is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Next item.
Item 17, 23R4143, a resolution by Community Development and Human Services Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the Department of City Planning to enter into Amendment Number 2 for the contract agreement FC 10449 zoning ordinance rewrite with Tunnel, Spangler, Walsh, and Associates to expand the scope of work to include additional comprehensive planning services and to increase the contract funding by an amount not to exceed $612,500.00 and for other purposes.
We have Doug Young with the Department of City Planning. Good to see you, sir.
Good afternoon, council members, committee members. Doug Young, Director of the Office of Design, Department of City Planning. We're here to ask for your support for a continuing amendment to the existing zoning rewrite contract to incorporate next phase of our comprehensive development plan activities. As you might remember, the zoning rewrite work and the CDP or comprehensive development plan are inextricably linked as far as they both manage land use and land use patterns in the city of Atlanta. And we think that this firm that's been working with us for about 2 years on the zoning rewrite contract is still well suited to provide the services for the CDP. This will take us through next year's work, and that'll actually become part of our next year's work. Will include a lot more public-facing activities, so you'll be hearing more about that from our department as well.
Any questions, comments from colleagues? Seeing none, there's a motion by Westmoreland to approve, a second by myself. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Next item.
Item 18, 23R4144, a resolution by Community Development and Human Services Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta and the Department of Parks and Recreation to extend the Memorandum of Understanding and Operating Agreement with Piedmont Park Conservancy for a period not to exceed 6 months and for other purposes.
All right, Deputy Commissioner Voss.
Many Doug's here today. Doug Voss, Department of Parks and Recreation. The city entered into an MOU with PPC, the Piedmont Park Conservancy, in 2018. That agreement had a 5-year commitment with a 5-year renewal. Before that expired, PPC asked if they could review the terms, and it was brought for this committee in March through CM1 to extend that by 6 months. PPC has returned many of their comments last month. We are not going to be able to go through all of them. PPC reviews has many items in the park that they manage on behalf of the city, so we're just requesting additional time. I will say I believe we will make the 6-month additional time to get that completed, but we really need the time to go through their comments.
All right, any questions or comments? See none, I'll go ahead and move approval. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Next item.
Item number 19 is 23R4145, a resolution by Community Development and Human Services Committee pursuant to Chapter 2, Article 9, Division 1, Section 2-910, authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the Executive Office of the Mayor to submit an application for the Summer Jobs Connect implementation grant from Summer Jobs Connect, an initiative of the City Foundation and CFE Fund, to become eligible for an award of up to $50,000.00 for the purpose of launching banking integration partnerships in support of the city's summer youth employment program and to address challenges faced by unbanked youth in the city of Atlanta and for other purposes.
We have Teresa Austin Gibbons, Community Affairs Manager. Good to see you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Dozier and other council members. This resolution is for the Summer Youth Employment Program for the year of 2024 to enter into submitting a grant for $50,000 to assist youth that are unbanked. We realize this year over 50% of our youth are unbanked, using Cash App and Venmo and other apps to collect their money or either through a debit card. So this would allow us to receive these funds if we are granted the $50,000 to work with youth in building a relationship with financial institutions within the city of Atlanta based on their choice.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and move to approve. Second by Waits. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you. All right, colleagues, that concludes resolutions. That takes us to dual referred items, which we have none. Next, we go to papers held in committee. We have 4 items that are coming off of held that are ready for committee action. Colleagues, number 30, which is ordinance 23-0-1116, will be the first item that we'll take. Mr. Evans, you can sound that caption, and then colleagues will have some additional legislative work before we take further action. So,
Item number 30, 23-0-1116, CDP 23-004, an amended ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee to amend the land use element of the 2021 Atlanta Comprehensive Development Plan so as to redesignate property located at 820 portion, 832, 836, and 1580 Flat Shoals Avenue Southeast and 816 Maynard Terrace Southeast from the single-family residential land use designation to the low-density commercial land use designation and for other purposes.
colleagues, we'll need to amend this item to insert property at 830 Flat Shoals Avenue Southeast into the CDP amendment, and then we'll have some further action there. But I'll go ahead and move to amend. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Motion to amend is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays. And then colleagues, we'll need to,
It's held.
It's already held, so we
Just,
don't-
we'll leave it as it is.
all right. So at a future meeting, this will come back up for future action, but we'll leave this one alone. All right, next item, 31.
23R 3401, a resolution by Councilmember Byron D. Amos authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into the FC number listed here, MLK Drive and ABI Bridge abutment art installation with Maria Artemis DBA Artemis Studios LLC pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for a signature metal and light sculpture public artwork under the Atlanta Beltline Bridge at Martin Luther King Jr. Drive in an amount not to exceed $270,000.00 to be charged to and paid from Fund Department organization and account numbers listed herein and for other purposes.
Colleagues, there's actually a request from the Office of Cultural Affairs to file this paper. The purpose of this paper was already achieved by an earlier resolution, which was 23R 3829, which was adopted by council on August 7th. And so I'll go ahead and move to file. Second by Amos. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the motion to file is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Next item, 32.
23-0-1272, an ordinance by Councilmember Jason Winston to adopt the Thomasville Heights Neighborhood Plan to amend the 2021 Comprehensive Development Plan by incorporating by reference said plan and for other purposes.
All right. I believe Matt Bedsole was supposed to speak to this, but since I don't see him, but I do see Councilmember Winston here, I'll give him an opportunity to speak to this legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to thank everyone that was involved in this process for the community development plan for Thomasville Heights. Colleagues, there were over 6 public meetings over the course of a year to help get this plan together. So many community members were involved, including, working with Community Foundation, APD Urban, Atlanta Housing, members of the Mayor's Housing Strike Force team, former members or former residents of Forest Cove who also were involved in this process, which really was an impetus of this plan and realizing that there was a lot of public land available in Thomasville Heights and making sure that we came up with a neighborhood plan that the community agreed upon. And so I'm excited to see this plan before us today because there were a lot of people who were involved in seeing this day happen. So I'd like to make a motion to approve.
All right. There's a motion by Winston. There's a second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right. The motion is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Then that takes us to item number 42.
That is 23-01422, CDP 2315, an ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee to amend the land use element of the 2021 Atlanta Comprehensive Development Plan so as to redesignate property located at 1915 James Jackson Parkway Northwest and 2646 Peyton Road Northwest from the industrial and single-family residential land use designations to the high-density residential land use designation and for other purposes.
All right, colleagues, similar to an earlier CDP amendment, we actually need to amend this item, and that amendment will remove a portion of 1915 James Jackson Parkway that has industrial land use and attach a new map that reflects this change. So I move to amend. Second by Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the motion to amend is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. And because this is already on hold, we don't need to take any additional action. And so with that, as they also say on television from time to time, but wait, there's more. I believe I stole that from a colleague. So colleagues, we have a walk-in item. This is ELMS number 33403. Mr. Evans, I'll give you a chance to sound the caption, but colleagues, just so y'all are aware, this is walk-in because this is tied to a grant application that has a deadline that is right around the corner. So this is a very time-sensitive matter, and so just wanted to give y'all an update on why we're accepting a walk-in today. So, Mr. Evans, if you can sound the caption, and we'll go from there.
This is a resolution by Community Development Human Services Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee, including the commissioner of the Department of City Planning, to apply for funding from the National Park Service in an amount not to exceed $75,000.00 for the FY 2023 African American Civil Rights Application Resources Grant Program for the purpose of creating an African American Civil Rights Movement context statement, and authorizing the mayor or his designee, including the commissioner of the Department of City Planning or the chief procurement officer, to enter into any agreements necessary for the application for acceptance of and implementation of the FY 2023 AACR grant program and for other purposes.
All right, we have Anthony Knight, project manager with the Department of City Planning. Good to see you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Anthony Knight, Office of Design. The purpose of this resolution is to allow us to apply for this National Park Service grant that focuses on the African American civil rights history. And the unique thing about this grant is that it wants us to look at that civil rights history from the time immediately after slavery, Reconstruction, through what most historians call the modern civil rights movement. And so that's why we're hoping to be able to apply for the grant. As a note, we applied last year, but we were not successful. They made some very strong recommendations, very helpful recommendations, and suggested we reapply this year.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Councilman Amos.
Getting this grant, what will we be producing? We'll be doing the research to do what?
Well, we'll be producing a number of things, a context statement. We're also hoping to produce educational materials. One of the things that we're hoping to do is also to be able to identify properties associated with individuals who were instrumental in the civil rights movement before the one that we're more familiar with, Dr. King and his colleagues. And we've already identified a couple of properties that could be helpful in that effort. So we hope to get some local designations as well as potentially some national listings.
Music to my ears. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Amos, second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
Thank you.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. All right, that concludes walk-ins. But colleagues, wait, there's more. We have an item referred from PSLA yesterday. Mr. Evans, if you can sound that caption.
That is 23-01402, an ordinance by Councilmember Keisha Shawn Waits to amend Part 3 Code of Ordinances, Land Development Code, Appendix B, Electrical Code Amendments, Chapter 1, Administration, to create a new section 101.10 to require the installation of infrastructure for exterior security cameras in certain buildings throughout the city and for other purposes.
Councilor Waits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have decided to hold this at the request of the Apartment Association. We've worked tirelessly with the Commercial Board of Realtors who are in support of the legislation, but nonetheless, we're working out some final details. I do want to go on record for those individuals who were impacted, the 140 vehicles that were broken into in multifamily housing, that this is an urgency for all of us to get it done. But nonetheless, we want to be sensitive to the industry and those who will be impacted by the legislation to not have unintended consequences, but to go on record for those individuals who are impacted directly by this legislation that this is certainly an urgent matter, and we look forward to hopefully passing this very soon.
Thank you.
We're going to hold. Motion to hold, please.
Motion to hold by Waits, second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. Would all members please vote? And the vote is closed.
All right, the motion to hold is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Sorry, I had you on the speaker list still, my bad. All right, well, that concludes our legislative agenda. We have no requested items. That takes us to general remarks. Any general remarks? Councilmember Winston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I neglected to make this announcement this morning in city utilities, but the Mayor's Office of Sustainability is starting a new program called Weatherize ATL. It will help with home preservation and reducing energy costs. This Friday and Saturday, they will have community canvassers going out to different communities that were identified in the heat vulnerability report that was commissioned by Councilmember Westmoreland and Bakhtiari. So just wanted to give folks that they will be out in communities canvassing this weekend to just generally tell folks about the program and making them more familiar with it.
All right. I have a couple announcements, but any other colleagues want to go ahead? Councilmember Waits.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to notify the body that I do intend to introduce legislation to provide a stipend to APAP members, the chair, the board members, as well as NPU chairs. I think given the amount of time and the contributions that they make, I think it is time that we consider that. I did have the opportunity to speak with Commissioner Prince surrounding this, and at this time they have no recommendations. But I would like to have that discussion among the body in terms of what would be reasonable given the time commitment that is involved, and also the fact that there are other boards within the city that are provided a very small minimal stipend to cover such things such as parking, as well as drive time and wear and tear on their vehicles. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Just real quick before we wrap up, I just wanted to share with my District 4 constituents, we have a host of programming coming up this weekend. Starting on Thursday, our Q3 town hall will be held at the Georgia Aquarium. So I just want to give a big thank you to our partners at the Georgia Aquarium for allowing our constituents to come in at no cost to not only participate in their government, but also see some fish and belugas and whale sharks and things like that. That'll be Thursday, September 14th at 6:30 p.m. Next on Friday, we are doing a movie night in partnership with the Department of Parks and Recreation at Rosa Burney Park in Mechanicsville at 6:30. We'll be showing the Super Mario Brothers movie. On Saturday, we're doing a family fun day over at Mosley Park. That will start at, I believe, 11 a.m. Over in the Mosley Park community. And then finally, Sunday, we are doing a family-friendly dance party event over at West End Park in West End, featuring Lady Marauder. Bring your families, bring your friends. Join me in my celebration of our wonderful District 4 communities. My team has colloquially called it Dozier Day Weekend. Don't try to make sense of it, but that's what they're calling it. But I appreciate y'all and hope to see you there. Even if you're not a District 4 constituent, you may be a future District 4 constituent. So I want to make sure that we can celebrate our communities as best as possible. So with that, I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.